I recently saw a post by a guy who basically said, if Trump doesn't win, with recounts and courts, etc., then I'm done, it's over, I give up. Now, what does that mean exactly? Is America suddenly not worth standing up for? Are American values suddenly not worth standing up for? How about Christian values? There is no giving up. There's nowhere else to go. There's no great bastion of freedom that we can all just run to. This is it. And we have to stand and, stand up for what's right. But regardless of whether Trump comes through this as our next president or not, now is the time to start forming groups and communities, online and offline. Whether if you do form them online, don't use the platforms of our enemies. And I know it sounds obvious, but people do it all the time. If you create a group on Facebook, expect it to get destroyed when it grows enough to accomplish something, when it grows enough to be perceived as a threat by those on the left. And it will. It takes surprisingly little for something to be perceived as a threat by leftists. Like these videos that I produce, I'm constantly walking on a tightrope of what I can say. We need communities that can't be sabotaged by the left. We need to use alternative tech as much as possible, and that means using sites like Gab to intercommunicate, to create groups. Heck, Gab runs on groups more than most social media sites. Then there's sites like Odysee for video. I did a whole video recently about Odysee as an alternative video platform. It's actually really good. In any case, if you use YouTube a lot, for your source of information and news and so on, if you're subscribed to a lot of people, you're probably noticing that it's gotten quiet recently. There's a couple of reasons for that. Some of it is that conservatives are a little wary right now about what they can say and about saying too much. But most of it is because video producers are putting out videos, but they're being silenced. They're being hidden. They're not being recommended. And it's really a similar situation to what's going on TV, where they're carefully curating what it is that you can see. Fox News even turned on us. They betrayed us by refusing to tell the truth. And by the way, they did something very similar 2 years ago during the midterm elections. But in any case, this is all to say they've destroyed our communications networks. That's a big reason why we're in the state that we're in. Because we can't coordinate. And for the other side, this is a war. And the first step in warfare is often to disrupt the enemy's communication channels. It's no surprise that on election day and election night, sites like BitChute, Gab, and 4chan were all under attack from various different coordinated groups which sought to shut them down. They were trying to prevent people like you and people like me from speaking, from communicating with each other, from even knowing what was going on, from being informed. It was all planned. We need to stop relying on, certainly like sites like Facebook and Twitter took a very different approach. They just actually took down the posts of conservatives, including the posts of the United States president. But more than that, you also need to get involved in state politics. And I know, this is an area where a lot of people just start rolling their eyes and saying, I don't really care about that. But a lot can be accomplished in state politics, and also you can make some decent friends who share your values. I don't think that can be really overstated either. But when you talk about state politics, those are the laws that affect you most, and also it's what determines our election rules. Those are actually determined at the state level, not at the federal level like a lot of people think. Like, for example, whether or not mail-in voting is allowed. Whether or not your state decides it's going to send unsolicited ballots to everybody on the voter rolls, regardless of whether they're dead, whether they've moved, whether they haven't even requested one, in which case they just end up in the trash and then somebody ends up filling it out for them. You get these situations where you've got, essentially, you're inviting fraud. Like a lot of the fraud that's going around. And these state laws, like I said, are what's most likely to affect you in everyday life. Like, the closer the government is to you, the more likely you are to run into it at some point. For example, if you run into a police officer or a sheriff's deputy, he's looking for violations of state law, not federal law. You're not likely to be charged with a federal crime unless you run into a federal agent. Like, for example, if you're in a national park, that kind of thing. Here's a rule for life. Never smoke marijuana in a national park, even in a state where it's legal, because those park rangers are federal agents. They will arrest you and charge you federally. unless the ranger is feeling especially nice. But seriously, most of the time, if you are arrested or in some way dealing with government problem, it's probably going to be at the state level. The state has a much bigger impact on your life than the federal government does. So get involved and don't just kind of roll your eyes to state politics. I know a lot of people do it, but don't. There are things that you can get involved with, such as that's how you can change what's taught in the schools, in your schools. Or whether universities allow students to defend themselves with firearms, or how hard it is for you to get a firearm, or whether your state actually acknowledges the concealed carry permits of other states, whether or not you have a stand your ground law to protect you if you have to protect yourself. All of these things, they're determined at the state level. I mean, these things that really do matter. So get involved with that. And I am serious when I say we need to start creating communities. Because offline and online, we're kind of relying still on the enemy of sorts to determine what we can say and what groups we can create. And we shouldn't be doing that. In fact, one area, I know I mentioned Fox News earlier, but when you think about it, there are so many people who have decided to tune out of mainstream news. That, okay, MSNBC, CNN, they're all lying to me. And then they tune into Fox, and they rely upon it as a source of truth. And as we've seen recently, it can't be relied upon. What we really need is for all of us to essentially create a free press so that, we can all intercommunicate as best as possible. We have our groups where we can actually get the word out. Right now, we're kind of losing, regardless of whether President Trump gets, into office again or not, we're still losing kind of like the culture war because we can't get the word out, we can't intercommunicate properly. And this has to change. We have to become our own media. And the answer is not just giving up. That's ludicrous. Like I said, we don't have anywhere else to go. We have to stand and make a stand and protect and defend our values, frankly, for future generations, no less. But that involves us creating our own media, having our own intercommunication, and so on. So don't give up, just, join. Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.